Um, I'm going to be talking about building, governing, and scaling API-first architectures at enterprise scale. How many of you are familiar with InterSwitch? How many of you have consumed any InterSwitch API? What was your experience? I need honest feedback. Yes, you can.
Okay, so before, I think InterSwitch later moved to something similar to Outpaystack and stuff, but before then, it was a friend of us.
Exactly. So that's what we're talking about. Building, governing, and scaling API-first architecture at enterprise scale. Sorry, it's not working. Yeah, okay. Okay, so this is me. My name is Ademola Adelekan, and I head the DevOps engineering in the DECO business unit in InterSwitch. So today I'm going to be talking about these topics: DevOps and API first today, DevOps principles in the API lifecycle, building scalable API platforms, automated governance and CI/CD, API observability and performance, lessons from the enterprise practice. Yeah, so sorry. From, okay, something is wrong with this. Still going to the slides I don't. So like the previous speaker said, APIs are now more digital products and they must evolve, be reliable, and deliver great developer experience. So that was why I first asked that. How many of you have consumed InterSwitch API before? Initially, we had a monolith architecture. Then along the time, we moved from monolith to microservices. And at scale, you deal with governance, security, developer experience, and this is why we prioritize developer experience when consuming those APIs. Not just on the developer side, but also the customer side of things. So moving to the next slide, applying DevOps principles. So here we're talking about continuous integration, deployment and feedback loops. It keeps APIs consistent and improves quality. So imagine having a CI/CD pipeline that prioritizes efficiency with your APIs. I'm sure most of you are familiar with pipelines where you build on Jenkins, there's one script line somewhere applying it directly to the environment. We are looking at a situation where you have CI/CD pipelines that have policy sets in place. You have the continuous testing. You have your static code analysis. How many of you are familiar with Sonar Cloud? Sonar Cloud. Wow. How many developers are here? Wow, okay, so I'm a developer and writing it. Raise up your hand. Jesus. These are the issues. Okay, so this is the mindset we are trying to put into the feedback you get from deploying those applications without writing unit tests. At least test what you've written. Be sure that it's working. It's not about just writing the code and pushing it to the environment. Have a mindset of let me test the API first before deploying. So this is why we are talking about the feedback loops. Feedback loops is when a QA engineer, do you have any QA engineer in the building? Thank you. So this is the mindset we are trying to build where we are applying these policies on pipelines where the developer writing his code is checking into the repository. From there, a CI/CD kicks in where you see a feedback from your API. It gets tested automatically in the pipeline. It goes through Sonar Cloud Scan for static code analysis, meaning it's going to analyze your code and give feedbacks. So if you have multiple threads opening and you're not closing them, you have memory leaks within your application, you see all these on the pipeline. Let me move to the next slide. Here now we are talking about the platform teams. These are cross-functional teams creating self-service platforms by for developers. Instead of asking operations for infrastructure, how many of you are familiar with the Cage? It's a platform where developers can go, okay, I need the Ubuntu 16, they bootstrap it. It's similar to a console on AWS where you log in, you provision an EC2 instance. If you are working in an environment where you have a physical data center, the experience is different. So what we are talking about here is a cross-functional team that builds and maintains internal developer platforms, abstracting infrastructure complexity. You don't need to know what I'm installing backend to provision or bring up an Ubuntu instance just for you to do your test. A self-service infrastructure are API tools where you automate templates and developer portals that empower teams to provision and manage their own APIs. Supporting thousands of developers, scaling consistent platforms, while maintaining security, compliance, and performance at enterprise scale. So these are the mindsets we want to bring into the API development. So next slide is automating API governance. So I'm going to be sharing a real-life example where in InterSwitch, you cannot just commit and say you're going to get directly into the environment, even as little as dev environment. You go through different stages within the pipeline. You get instant feedbacks. You push your code. When you push your code, it goes through the static code analysis. Like I said, we use Sonar Cloud. From Sonar Cloud, we move to Veracode. Veracode is a security tool that checks for vulnerabilities within your code. Your API might work fine, but you might be exposing the company. And by exposure of vulnerability, you can run down a business. So from there, checking Veracode, you get your instant feedback from those APIs that you are trying to build. Then from there, you get deployed into the dev environment. When you get deployed into the dev environment, there's an approval button that only the QA is allowed to approve to get into the QA environment for testing. There, after it gets into the QA environment, the QA has written a set of automated tests. If it breaks, it goes back to the developer, and that's an automated test for API contract. How we reduced, when we did this, we were able to reduce governance overhead by 75% while increasing API reliability through our automated gates. Yeah, so policy as code. This policy as code was one of the conversations I was having about security in your environment. What is policy as code? Is codifying security rules, compliance requirements, and governance standards as version-controlled artifacts. Working in an industry that is highly regulated, like the fintechs, you have to make sure you are compliant. And enforcing this security and compliance, we have automated validation of API specifications. How many of you are familiar with Open Policy Agents? Yeah. Thank you. Open Policy Agents are like Spectra, Kong policies, AWS API Gateway, are used for policy enforcement on the pipelines. Yeah, so observability and API monitoring. What you should understand about this is, no matter how good you feel your APIs are, you have to track your latency, error rates. I have 1 minute, I'm going to rush this. Traffic volume and consumer adoption. Alerting and traceability allows you to know, be proactive about your environment and what your experience, the experience of whoever is consuming your API is. Enterprise scale tooling like Prometheus, Grafana, OpenTelemetry, the observability as code. Scaling internal APIs would be supporting thousands of internal customers, versioning, documentation, discoverability, managing change at scale, and optimizing developer experience. I'm a fan of customer experience. And we have the golden path and paved roads, standardized secure blueprints that accelerate API development while ensuring best practice, developer portals and onboarding, reducing friction and errors. Then enterprise lessons learned. What worked was the cross-functional teams with shared OKRs and aligned incentives. What didn't work, trying to build everything in-house, leverage existing tools. Then common challenges, we had legacy systems integration, security concerns, knowledge gaps. Scaling successfully, we started small, we proved the value, standardized, and expanded gradually. Key takeaways, integrate API first thinking with DevOps scale for maximum impact, embed security and compliance into your pipelines through policy as code, create self-service golden paths that accelerates innovation. Thank you. Do you guys have any questions? What it means is, imagine releasing an API, and for every cycle within the sprint, the keyway is telling you, because they are doing manual tests, is having to take 3-5 days to test for functional tests, non-functional tests, security testing, penetration testing. But if you put all this as policy within your pipeline, it reduces that overhead. That's it. Thank you. Okay.
Was there any trade-off when you are running all of these tests? Because like a large code base with too much tests sometimes takes a lot of time. Was there any trade-off, or you use any tool that help you run tests outside the dev?
Okay, so that is why you have at the first stage of the CI pipeline, you have Sonar Cloud. Sonar Cloud is going to check through your unit test. Then during your build, if you have written your unit test within your code, you've covered a large component of the code and everything is fine. So the QA has more focus on the functional part of the application. So where you can have your APIs with automated tests focusing on major components within the application that can break the user experience. So that's what that means.
Because my focus is more around, imagine I'm pushing a feature, and on the code base, I already have 1,000 tests. Because I'm speaking from experience of how we run unit tests.
Okay.
I already have 1,000 tests. If I'm trying to push that code base on all this git hook, it tries to still run all of those tests. Because my new test, which sometimes it takes a whole lot of time to so
If you're having that number of tests, that means you're not running a microservice.
no, like I'm looking at industries now as
Okay.
a very large code base. Even though with microservice, a particular service might have enough tests, especially front end.
Yeah.
So that's like a use case that I'm thinking about. I'm just asking a question of how do you handle that use case?
And the use case for, there's nothing like too much tests. I'd rather run too much tests than have a reputational damage. So if it's a front-end application that has so many components, I would rather allow the pipeline perform its duty. Go through each test, because the test you overlook might be the one that causes you a reputational damage. So we'll find a way to optimize the test. So if you are running 5 negative tests, you can put all those 5 tests into a test case. Rather than running a test case, you can put all those tests into a single test case. That reduces the execution time and also gives you the end result, which is I want to test the entire product end to end.
Thank you. I think it's that reducing timeline. Yeah, thank you.
So that's a question. I just
Okay.
want to request maybe if you can share the slide with
The slide?
Is there a way you can share the slide?
Yeah, sure, definitely. Definitely. Thank you.